When the brutal Russia-Ukraine conflict first began 4 years ago, very few experts anticipated it would become the bloodiest European war since 1945. The horrifying numbers that have recently emerged paint a truly staggering and heartbreaking picture of massive human loss on both sides of this war. As of early 2026, the combined casualties for both nations are estimated to have approached nearly 2 million people caught in this devastating fight. This massive figure is definitely not a typo, as 2 million brave soldiers have been killed, wounded, or gone missing since the initial invasion. Many observers originally thought this regional conflict would be over in just a few days, but the situation has turned into a nightmare. However, the true death toll from these battlefields may be even worse than the official statistics that we currently realize in our reports. We must ask why the actual numbers of casualties are so incredibly hard to pin down with any real accuracy or total certainty. To understand the full scale of this tragedy, we must start at the very beginning of the invasion that changed the world forever. When Russia officially invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022, both Moscow and Kyiv remained very tight-lipped about their specific battlefield losses and deaths. Russia characterized the entire invasion as a special military operation and insisted that their casualties were minimal during the first few weeks of fighting. Ukraine, while fighting for its very survival as a nation, had every reason to keep its own casualty numbers close to its chest. They wanted to avoid demoralizing their civilian population and their military forces during the initial chaotic stages of this massive and violent invasion. By the end of 2022, various Western intelligence agencies began releasing detailed casualty estimates that shocked many international observers and seasoned military analysts. The United States assessed that Russia had suffered somewhere between 100,000 and 120,000 total casualties in the first 10 months of active fighting. This staggering total includes both those killed in action and those who were severely wounded during the intense early stages of the conflict. Ukraine's military losses were estimated to be quite similar during that same period of time, according to many different Western intelligence reports and sources. These were massive numbers not seen in any European conflict since the large-scale and bloody battles of the Second World War were fought. Unfortunately, the year 2023 would prove to be even deadlier for both sides, as the war quickly settled into a grinding, attritional struggle. During this time, the casualty rates actually began to accelerate as both nations committed more troops and more heavy weapons to the front. The British Ministry of Defense estimated in early 2023 that Russia was losing around 700 soldiers every single day on the Ukrainian battlefields. This daily loss was somewhere between 200 and 300 more than they had seen during the initial invasion months of the previous year. That loss is essentially the equivalent of an additional Russian battalion being completely wiped out every 3 to 4 days of heavy fighting. By mid-2023, high-ranking U.S. officials were estimating that combined casualties for both sides had already surpassed the 500,000 mark in this war. 500,000 human beings were either killed or wounded in just over a year of intense and brutal fighting on the front lines. The horrific battle for Bakhmut, which raged from August 2022 through May 2023, is the perfect example of the massive death toll involved. Russia's Wagner Group mercenaries, many of whom were recruited directly from federal prisons, were sent in wave after wave to overwhelm Ukrainian positions. This brutal tactic eventually worked for the Russian forces, but it came at a truly horrific cost of human lives for the mercenary group. Conservative estimates suggest that Russia lost over 20,000 men just to capture a single city that had very limited strategic value for them. Then the year 2024 arrived, and the level of bloodshed across the entire front line intensified even further than anyone had previously predicted. Russia officially shifted to what many military analysts now call meat grinder tactics, sending squads of poorly trained soldiers forward to find defenses. These small squads would probe the Ukrainian defensive lines, drawing heavy fire and revealing the secret positions of the defending soldiers to artillery. Russian artillery and attack drones would then hammer those identified positions before the next wave of fresh infantry was sent to advance forward. While it was brutally effective at identifying targets, this strategy consumed Russian manpower at a truly alarming and unsustainable rate during the offensive. By April 2025, General Christopher Cavoli estimated that Russia had suffered more than 790,000 soldiers killed or injured in the ongoing bloody conflict. This number represents a staggering loss of life that few people could have imagined when the first tanks crossed the border into Ukraine. The significant discrepancy in these various estimates is primarily due to the massive and ongoing challenges in tracking battlefield casualties accurately today. Neither side in this conflict is willing to provide exactly accurate or truthful information because of the high political stakes involved. Different methodologies and intelligence-gathering techniques used by various organizations often produce very different results for the public to analyze closely. Ukraine's losses, while smaller in absolute numbers than Russia's, were proportionally devastating given its much smaller population and limited military reserves. President Zelensky stated in February 2025 that over 46,000 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed while defending their homeland from the invaders. He also noted that approximately 380,000 soldiers had been wounded, though many were able to return to their combat units eventually. Now we are standing in 2026, 4 full years into this brutal conflict, and the reported numbers have become truly astronomical. According to a comprehensive analysis published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Russia has suffered approximately 2 million total casualties. That shocking figure includes between 275,000 and 325,000 soldiers who have been confirmed as killed in action on the bloody battlefields. In the single year of 2025 alone, Russia lost roughly 415,000 soldiers, which averages out to nearly 35,000 casualties every single month. December 2024 actually marked the deadliest month of the entire war for Russian forces, with a staggering average of 1,570 casualties per day. Ukraine's total casualties are currently estimated at between 500,000 and 600,000. With over 100,000 brave soldiers losing their lives in the defense. This means the combined death and injury toll for both nations is currently hovering somewhere around the 8 million people mark today. At these current rates of attrition, analysts predict that this number will likely cross the 2 million mark by the spring 2026. To put these massive numbers into a clear perspective, Russia's battlefield fatalities are more than 17 times greater than the Soviet losses. Their current losses are also 11 times greater than the casualties suffered during both of the Chechen wars combined in previous decades. In fact, Russia has lost more soldiers in Ukraine than it did in all of its previous conflicts combined since World War II. No major global power has suffered anywhere near these catastrophic casualty numbers in any single war fought since the year of 1945. This shift in military strategy toward pure attrition has created a landscape where human life is often treated as a cheap resource. The battle for Bakhmut remains a haunting symbol of this mindset, where thousands of men died for just a few square meters. The air in that broken city was reportedly thick with the smell of gunpowder, decay, and the constant smoke from heavy artillery. Wagner mercenaries were pushed forward into the line of fire with almost no concern for their survival or their future back home. These men were often used as human shields to identify the exact locations of Ukrainian machine guns and hidden sniper nests nearby. Once the Ukrainian positions were revealed by the deaths of these convicts, the Russian heavy artillery would begin its relentless, crushing barrage. This cycle of violence repeated day after day for months, turning the once vibrant city of Bakhmut into a gray, lifeless wasteland. This approach to warfare has left deep scars on the survivors, who must live with the memory of such incredible and pointless slaughter. Even as the front lines moved, the fields of Ukraine remained littered with the remains of those who fell in this grinding conflict. The tactical value of these small gains is often debated by experts, who wonder if the territorial advances are worth the human cost. The reasons why these official casualty numbers are so murky and difficult to obtain are deeply rooted in political strategy and propaganda. Both the Russian and Ukrainian governments have very strong incentives to carefully manipulate the narrative surrounding their own battlefield losses and deaths. Russia wants to maintain the public illusion that its special military operation is going according to plan, without any major military setbacks. They frequently claim that the mounting human and material losses are acceptable and necessary to achieve their stated long-term geopolitical goals today. Meanwhile, the government in Kyiv needs to maintain vital Western support and keep its domestic morale as high as possible for victory. This requires carefully managing the flow of sensitive information about their own losses to avoid scaring away their many vital international allies. Russia's specific approach to this problem has been a systematic suppression of all military casualty data from the public eye and media. The Kremlin has officially classified all battlefield information as protected state secrets, making it illegal for anyone to report on these many deaths. Independent journalists who dare to report on these massive losses face up to 15 years in a harsh and isolated federal prison. Even major independent media outlets like Echo Moskvy and Dozhd were quickly shut down during the very early stages of the bloody conflict. Harsh foreign agent laws have effectively silenced most forms of investigative reporting that could reveal the true extent of the human carnage. This narrative resonates with many older Russians who remember the 27 million Soviet citizens who died defeating Adolf Hitler's fascist forces. If their grandfathers could sustain those massive losses to defeat fascism, then modern Russia should accept these current casualties as well now. The Kremlin also spends truly enormous sums of money on compensation payments to the grieving families of dead and wounded soldiers every month. In 2024 alone, Russia allocated over 1.2 trillion rubles for these payments, which is roughly equivalent to $15 billion in total. This provides critical financial support to families who might otherwise protest the war, while allowing the government to track losses internally today. Independent verification efforts, such as the work by Media Zona and the BBC Russian service, have tried to fill this massive information gap. They have compiled a named list of Russian military dead by scouring social media posts, local news reports, and government websites daily. As of early 2026, they had confirmed over 160,000 Russian deaths by name, though this only represents a fraction of total losses. Many families never publicly announce these deaths, and Russian authorities actively work to suppress any information that might reach the public eye. The most troubling revelation came in late 2025, when it emerged that Russian courts were filing tens of thousands of missing person lawsuits. By December 2025, investigators identified approximately 88,000 such court claims, filed by families desperate for some information about their missing loved ones. Shortly after this discovery, Russian courts began to systematically delete these sensitive records from public databases to hide the true scale here. Defense Minister Andrei Belousov inadvertently revealed the scale of the crisis when he stated that half of all missing persons were found. If 90,000 lawsuits represent only half of all missing soldiers, it suggests that 180,000 bodies remain unrecovered on the vast Ukrainian battlefields. This tragic number represents a generation of young men whose futures were cut short by a conflict they likely did not fully understand. To understand the true scale of casualties, we must look at the numbers before and after, which reveal something practically unique to this conflict. Russia has essentially burned through its entire pre-war professional military force and has transitioned to a mass mobilization army in recent years. When Russia began its invasion in February 2022, it deployed roughly 190,000 soldiers who were supposed to be the nation's absolute best. These were professional contract soldiers, elite airborne units, and Spetsnaz special forces who were expected to seize Kyiv in just a few days. The plan was for a rapid advance to decapitate the Ukrainian government within weeks. But we all know how that turned out eventually. By mid-2022, Vladimir Putin could either admit defeat or double down on his invasion. And he ultimately chose the latter very decisively. In September 2022, Russia announced a partial mobilization of 300,000 reservists to help replace the massive losses sustained in the early months. This mobilization disproportionately targeted ethnic minorities and men from Russia's poorest regions, like the Far East, Siberia, and the North Caucasus regions. Minority groups ended up suffering casualty rates far exceeding their actual population percentages, according to many detailed demographic studies of the war. But even 300,000 new soldiers weren't enough to replace the losses. So Russia turned to increasingly desperate measures to fill its ranks. Prisoners, including convicted murderers and rapists, were offered total freedom in exchange for 6 months of combat service on the front lines. The Wagner Group alone recruited over 48,000 convicts from Russian prisons, many of whom were sent into the meat grinder at Bakhmut. Those who survived their contracts came home as heroes, only for many to commit new crimes and re-enlist to avoid further prosecution. By 2024, Russia had created what amounts to a permanent war economy, centered around recruitment and the payment of very large bonuses. Regional governments compete to meet monthly recruitment quotas, offering signing bonuses that reached as high as $40,000 in some areas. This is life-changing money in regions where average monthly salaries hover around $500, making military service the only path today. According to official Russian figures, the military recruited 540,000 new contract soldiers in 2023, and another 427,000 in the year of 2024. In 2025, that number dropped to approximately 417,000 new recruits, as the pool of available men began to shrink across the entire country. But these are not the professional soldiers Russia deployed in February 2022, as most receive only 3 to 4 weeks of training. They are learning to operate in modern, drone-saturated battlefields while under fire, rather than in controlled and safe training environments back home. That significant difference in quality and experience is costing Russia the war, as their elite units are replaced by poorly trained recruits. The pre-war army had many junior officers who understood combined arms operations and the proper use of artillery support on the battlefield. Many of those experienced officers are now dead, considering that close to 6,500 Russian officers have been confirmed killed in the war. More than half of these losses were junior officers like lieutenants and captains, who are essential for leading soldiers during intense combat. New officers are being rushed through abbreviated training programs, often with as little as 2 months of training before taking command here. They are learning on the job, and their soldiers are paying the ultimate price for this lack of experience on the front. The result is a Russian military that looks nothing like the force that originally invaded Ukraine back in the year of 2022. Adding to Russia's immense problems is the critical equipment situation, as heavy weaponry becomes increasingly scarce on the modern battlefield today. Western intelligence assessments state that Russia has lost more than 4,000 main battle tanks since the start of the war. This massive loss represents more than its entire pre-war active inventory of tanks, which were supposed to be the best. Moscow has been forced to reactivate ancient Soviet-era tanks from deep storage, some dating back to the late 1960s. These old vehicles are being crewed by hastily trained recruits and sent into battle against modern Western anti-tank weapons today. Russia's current manufacturing capacity cannot produce new main battle tanks fast enough to replace these catastrophic losses on the front. Most of the tanks entering service are actually decades-old vehicles pulled from storage, refurbished, and sent directly to the lines. Analysts predict that by late 2026, Russia will face a critical shortage of armored vehicles if this rate of attrition continues. Why hasn't the Russian military collapsed, given these immense problems and the high casualty rates seen across the entire war? The answer comes down to simple mathematics and the strategic geography of two nations with very different total population sizes. Russia has a population of approximately 144 million people, compared to Ukraine's 37 million before the massive invasion even began. This nearly 4-to-1 advantage in raw numbers allows Russia to theoretically sustain a long war of attrition against its neighbor. Russia has nearly 19 million military-age males between 20 and 39, compared to only 5 million in the same bracket. Every Ukrainian soldier killed or wounded is proportionally more damaging to Ukraine's fighting capacity than a Russian soldier is to Russia. Moscow is betting that eventually Ukraine will run out of soldiers willing to fight, or that vital Western support will waver. However, Russia's supposed advantage in manpower has not translated to success in the way that Putin's generals originally anticipated here. Ukraine's defense-in-depth strategy has proven extraordinarily effective at multiplying Russian casualties through the use of elaborate trench systems and minefields. When Russian infantry attempt to storm these positions, they are hit by artillery, mortars, and swarms of first-person view drones. The drone saturation of the battlefield has fundamentally changed the calculus of warfare for both the attacking and the defending forces. Any vehicle movement within 10 miles of the front line has become nearly suicidal due to constant and lethal drone surveillance. Russia is essentially fighting a 20th century war of attrition while facing the realities of a modern 21st century digital battle space today. Its advantages in manpower and industrial capacity are being systematically negated by Ukrainian tactical innovation and advanced Western technological support. At the same time, Russia is becoming a second-tier power as its economy is under severe strain from international sanctions. The defense industry faces critical shortages of electronic components that were imported from the West before the invasion began 4 years ago. The true death toll of the Ukraine war is the erasure of futures and the permanent scarring of two neighboring nations. Whether the final count is 2 million or more, each number represents a human being who will never return home. That is the real cost of this war, and it is a price both nations continue to pay every single day. If you found this deep analysis valuable, please like this video and subscribe to the War Tech Pulse channel right now. We thank you for joining us today to explore these complex military issues, and we look forward to seeing you again.